The courtroom in Columbus, Ohio, should have been empty within minutes. Instead, every person inside remained exactly where they were. Judge Harlan Crow rested both hands on the bench after announcing his decision. Based on the evidence presented before this court, primary physical custody of Frank Buckley and Felicia Buckley is awarded to their father, Gavin Buckley. His voice was calm, measured, and final. For months, both parents had fought to prove they could provide the better home. The hearings had been filled with school records, financial documents, calendars, photographs, church activities, volunteer work, and testimony from neighbors who believed they knew the family well. Now the case appeared finished. A deputy gathered several folders from the witness stand, while another collected exhibits that had covered 2 long tables throughout the trial. Attorneys quietly zipped their briefcases. Several people seated in the gallery exchanged relieved smiles. Gavin Buckley stood beside his attorney, accepting a handshake before turning toward Shannon Pierce. Tears gathered in her eyes as she smiled with relief. She believed the hardest chapter of Gavin's life had finally ended. Across the room, Olivia William never moved. Her hands rested on her lap, gripping each other tightly. She heard the decision. She understood every word, yet nothing around her seemed real. She looked toward her children instead of the judge. Frank sat perfectly still beside his younger sister. Felicia leaned against the chair, confused by everything she had heard during the past several weeks. She was too young to understand why adults who once shared dinner around the same table now needed a courtroom to decide where she would sleep. Olivia fought the urge to run to both children. Instead, she remained where court rules required her to stay. Months of sacrifice had ended with a single sentence. She had spent years working overnight nursing shifts at Riverside Methodist Hospital, missing birthdays, school mornings, neighborhood gatherings, and countless hours of sleep so her family could stay financially secure. She never kept records of those sacrifices. She never photographed herself leaving for work before sunset or returning home after sunrise. She never documented the nights she sat beside sick patients while worrying about her own children. Love had never felt like something that needed proof. Today, she learned the law required evidence, not memories. Everything Gavin presented had been organized with remarkable care. Attendance records, school pickups, volunteer certificates, baseball coaching schedules, church activities, medical appointments, financial reports. Every page supported the same conclusion: a dependable father, a respected businessman, a trusted member of the community. Judge Crow had not ignored Olivia. He simply ruled according to the evidence placed before him. The courtroom slowly began returning to ordinary conversation. One attorney spoke quietly into a phone. Someone pushed a chair beneath a table. Paperwork changed hands. A deputy approached the clerk's desk carrying several signed documents. It felt like every difficult family hearing that had ever ended inside that courthouse, until one chair scraped softly across the floor. Frank stood. The 12-year-old did not cry. He did not look frightened. He wasn't trying to interrupt anyone. He simply raised one hand. Judge Crow noticed him immediately. "Yes, Frank?" Every adult expected the boy to ask whether he could hug his mother, or whether he could say goodbye before leaving with his father. Instead, Frank looked directly at the judge, not at Gavin, not at Olivia, only at the man who had just decided where he would live. His voice was quiet, almost careful. "Mr. Judge." The courtroom became still again. "If Dad takes us home..." Frank swallowed. "Will my little sister in the freezer finally live?" Silence followed. Not the ordinary silence of people waiting for someone else to speak. The kind of silence created when nobody understands what they have just heard. Judge Crow blinked once. Several attorneys slowly lowered the papers in their hands. The deputy carrying court files stopped walking. One folder slipped slightly beneath his arm, but he never noticed. Olivia stared at her son. Her heartbeat quickened. Little sister? She and Gavin only had 2 children. Frank and Felicia. She searched Frank's face, hoping she had misunderstood. Beside him, Felicia looked equally confused. She tugged gently on her brother's sleeve. "Frank." He never looked away from the judge. Across the aisle, Shannon's smile disappeared. She turned toward Gavin. His expression changed so quickly it caught her attention before anyone else. Only moments earlier, He had looked relieved, confident, certain the future had finally turned in his favor. Now every bit of color drained from his face. His jaw tightened. His breathing became shallow. For the first time since the custody trial began, Gavin Buckley looked like a man who was genuinely afraid. Welcome to Will and Rise Stories. To every single person listening right now, thank you for being here. This channel is growing because of people like you who truly love emotional, unforgettable storytelling. Please support the channel by subscribing. Now, let's return to the courtroom, because one little boy's next words are about to change every life inside it. Judge Harlan Crow looked across the courtroom before speaking. After reviewing all the evidence presented, this court awards primary physical custody of Frank Buckley and Felicia Buckley to their father, Gavin Buckley. His decision ended months of hearings. Gavin slowly released a deep breath. His attorney reached over and shook his hand. "You got the result we worked for," he said quietly. Gavin nodded. "Thank you." A deputy began collecting court exhibits. Another gathered signed documents from the clerk's desk. Lawyers closed their briefcases. People seated in the gallery quietly prepared to leave. Several church members smiled toward Gavin. They believed a good father had finally received the outcome he deserved. Shannon Pierce wiped away a tear. She looked at Gavin with relief. "This is finally over," she whispered. Gavin gave a small smile. "It is." Across the courtroom, Olivia William remained seated. She never looked at Gavin. She looked only at Frank and Felicia. Her chest felt tight. She had spent months hoping the court would understand why she worked overnight shifts at Riverside Methodist Hospital. Every extra shift had been for her family. The higher pay covered mortgage payments, braces for Frank, dance lessons for Felicia, groceries, insurance, and unexpected bills. She never imagined those sacrifices would one day be weighed against folders filled with calendars, photographs, volunteer records, and attendance logs. She wasn't angry with Judge Crow. He had ruled according to the evidence placed before him. From everything shown during the trial, Gavin appeared dependable. He coached youth baseball. He volunteered at church. He attended school activities. Neighbors praised him. Teachers respected him. Every witness described the same man, a devoted father, a reliable businessman, a caring member of the community. Olivia lowered her eyes. She knew the judge could only decide based on what he had seen. The courtroom slowly became busy again. A deputy carried several folders toward the exit. The court reporter organized her notes. Someone pushed a chair beneath the table. Everything looked like another ordinary custody hearing reaching its end. Frank suddenly stood. Nobody expected it. He wasn't upset. He wasn't crying. He simply raised his hand. Judge Crow immediately noticed. "Yes, Frank?" Every face turned toward the boy. Frank looked directly at the judge. "Mr. Judge." Judge Crow waited patiently. "If Dad takes us home." Frank swallowed. "Will my little sister in the freezer finally live?" Every movement inside the courtroom stopped. The deputy carrying documents froze where he stood. An attorney slowly lowered the file in his hands. The clerk stared at Frank. Nobody understood what they had just heard. Judge Crow leaned forward. "Frank, what did you say?" Frank answered exactly as before. "I asked if my little sister in the freezer will finally live." Olivia felt her heart race. She turned toward her son. "Frank." He looked at her. "I told the truth, Mom." She searched his face. There was no confusion, no fear. He honestly believed what he was saying. Felicia looked from her mother to her brother. "Frank, what little sister?" He didn't answer her. His eyes stayed on the judge. Across the aisle, Shannon looked at Gavin. Only seconds earlier, he had looked relieved. Now every bit of color disappeared from his face. His hands tightened against the table. He opened his mouth as if to speak. Nothing came out. Judge Crow noticed the change immediately. He looked back at Frank. "Come here, son." Frank walked slowly to the front of the courtroom. Judge Crow softened his voice. "Tell me about your little sister." Frank answered without hesitation. "Dad said she's sleeping." The courtroom remained completely focused on him. "Where is she sleeping?" the judge asked. "In the big freezer downstairs." Several people exchanged uneasy looks. Judge Crow continued carefully. What freezer? The big one in our basement. When did your father tell you this? A long time ago. How old were you? I don't remember. What exactly did he say? Frank thought for a moment. He told me never to open it. Why? Because my baby sister was sleeping inside. Did he tell you anything else? Frank nodded. He said one day she'd wake up. Judge Crow kept his expression calm. And did he tell you not to tell anyone? Yes. What did he say would happen? Frank lowered his head. He said people wouldn't understand. The judge waited. Frank continued. He said if I told anybody, our family would be destroyed. Nobody interrupted. Nobody looked away. Judge Crow had listened to thousands of witnesses during his years on the bench. Children sometimes became confused. Children sometimes imagined things. Frank did not sound confused. He answered every question immediately. His words never changed. Judge Crow slowly turned toward Gavin. Senor Buckley. Before he could continue, Gavin stood. Your Honor, my son has been under enormous stress. Judge Crow remained silent. Gavin forced a nervous smile. He's talking about an old family misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? Judge Crow asked. He misunderstood something I told him years ago. What exactly did you tell him? Gavin hesitated. I have to think about that. Judge Crow studied him. You don't remember? I do. Gavin cleared his throat. I just don't remember my exact words. Frank immediately spoke. I do. Everyone looked back at him. Dad said she was sleeping. He told me never to touch the freezer. He told me she'd wake up someday. He said if I told anyone. Frank's voice became quieter. He'd go away forever. The courtroom became still once again. Judge Crow made his decision immediately. He looked toward the deputies. Closed the courtroom doors. Without asking another question, the deputies moved into position. Nobody left. Nobody entered. Judge Crow looked at the clerk. Contact child interview specialists immediately. Then he turned back to Frank. You did the right thing by speaking today. Frank gave a small nod. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Olivia realized this custody case had just become something entirely different. The decision that had ended one case had just opened another. 3 years earlier, life inside the Buckley home looked completely different. Their house sat in a quiet neighborhood on the northwest side of Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't the biggest house on the street. It wasn't the newest. But it was always clean, welcoming, and full of life. Children rode bicycles until sunset. Neighbors waved from their front porches. Weekend cookouts brought families together. Everyone believed the Buckleys were one of the strongest families in the neighborhood. Olivia William believed it too. Most mornings, she drove home from Riverside Methodist Hospital just as parents were walking their children to school. Her overnight nursing shift usually lasted 12 hours. Some nights became 13. Others stretched even longer when emergencies filled every hospital room. By the time she reached home, she was exhausted. Still, she smiled whenever she saw Frank waiting near the front window. He always knew when her car pulled into the driveway. He rushed outside before she even stepped onto the sidewalk. Morning, Mom. She smiled despite her tired eyes. Morning, buddy. He hugged her tightly. You worked all night again? I did. You look tired. I'll feel better after some sleep. Frank took her lunch bag. I'll carry this. You don't have to. I know. He carried it anyway. Inside the house, the smell of breakfast filled the kitchen. Felicia sat at the table, swinging her feet beneath the chair. The moment she saw Olivia, her face lit up. Mom! She ran across the room. Olivia bent down and hugged her daughter. Good morning, sweetheart. Felicia looked at her carefully. Did you help sick people? I helped as many as I could. You always do. Olivia kissed her forehead. I try. Gavin walked from the kitchen carrying a plate. You made it home. Olivia smiled. Busy night. I saved you breakfast. You always know what I need. He placed scrambled eggs and toast on the table. Eat before you sleep. She laughed softly. You're starting to sound like a nurse. I learned from the best one. Frank smiled. Felicia giggled. The house filled with easy conversation. Nothing about that morning suggested trouble. After breakfast, Olivia walked the children to the front door. School first, she reminded them. Frank adjusted his backpack. I've got science today. I know. I'm presenting my project. You'll do great. Felicia lifted her dance bag. I have practice after school. Olivia smiled. I'll ask you to show me every new step tonight. You promise you'll watch? I wouldn't miss it. The children climbed into the family SUV. Gavin looked at Olivia. I'll take them. Thank you. He smiled. Get some sleep. Olivia watched them drive away before heading upstairs. She had only a few hours before doing everything again. She never complained. Working nights paid more than daytime shifts. That extra income made a difference every month. It paid for Frank's braces. It covered Felicia's dance lessons. It helped with mortgage payments. It gave the children opportunities she never had growing up. To Olivia, every long night was worth it. Inside the hospital, people respected her. Patients remembered her name. Families requested her whenever possible. She never rushed anyone. She listened carefully. She explained complicated medical situations in simple words. Even frightened patients relaxed after speaking with her. One morning, after finishing another demanding shift, a patient's daughter stopped her near the nurse's station. Ms. William? Olivia turned. Yes? My father asked me to thank you. You don't have to thank me. He said you treated him like family. Olivia smiled warmly. I'm glad he's feeling better. He said you stayed with him when everyone else was busy. I didn't want him to feel alone. The woman wiped away a tear. You made a difficult night easier. Olivia squeezed her hand. I wish him a full recovery. As she walked away, another nurse smiled. You never leave work on time. Olivia laughed. I keep trying. You care too much. I don't think that's possible. The nurse shook her head with a smile. You always put everybody else first. Olivia never answered. She simply picked up her bag and headed home. Across Columbus, Gavin started his own workday. Buckley Cooling Services had earned a strong reputation throughout central Ohio. Restaurants called him when their walk-in coolers stopped working. Churches trusted him with emergency repairs before community events. Schools depended on him to keep cafeteria refrigeration running. Small grocery stores often requested him by name. People appreciated two things about Gavin. He arrived when he promised. He finished the job correctly. One Friday afternoon, Pastor Calvin greeted him outside the church kitchen. I'm glad you could come. Gavin smiled. You said the freezer stopped working. It did. We've got food arriving tomorrow. I'll have it running before I leave. Pastor Calvin placed a hand on his shoulder. We appreciate everything you do. I'm happy to help. Less than 2 hours later, the freezer was working again. Pastor Calvin thanked him once more before Gavin loaded his tools. The following Saturday, Gavin coached youth baseball. Parents filled the bleachers. Children laughed across the field. Frank had played under his father for several seasons before moving into older leagues. Even after Frank aged out of the team, Gavin continued volunteering. Coach Owen often praised him. I wish every father showed up like Gavin. Many parents agreed. After practice, several children lined up to thank him before heading home. That reputation followed Gavin everywhere. Neighbors trusted him. Church members respected him. Business owners recommended him. Everyone believed he was exactly the man he appeared to be. That evening, the Buckley family ate dinner together. Frank talked excitedly about school. Felicia demonstrated part of a new dance routine in the living room. Gavin applauded. Olivia laughed as Felicia finished with a dramatic bow. Frank teased his little sister. You almost fell. I did not. You wobbled. I was spinning. You were falling. I was dancing. Everyone laughed. Olivia looked around the table. Moments like these reminded her why she worked so hard. She believed her family was secure. She believed Gavin shared the same dream. She believed they were building a future together. Looking through the front window that evening, Any neighbor would have seen a happy family enjoying another ordinary day. No one could have guessed that the life everyone admired was already beginning to change. Life continued the same way for several months. Olivia worked nights. Gavin ran Buckley cooling services. Frank focused on school. Felicia looked forward to every dance class. From the outside, nothing seemed different. Inside the house, small changes quietly began to appear. One morning, Olivia came home after another overnight shift. She placed her bag beside the front door. Gavin was sitting at the dining table reviewing paperwork. He looked up. "You're late. There was an emergency surgery. You could have called." "My phone stayed in my locker." He closed the folder in front of him. "You knew Frank had a meeting at school. I asked if you could cover it." "I shouldn't have to." Olivia frowned. "You've attended plenty of his meetings. So now you're counting?" "No. You always get defensive." She rubbed her tired eyes. "I've been awake all night." "We're all tired." The conversation ended there. No shouting, no insults, no slammed doors. Even so, Olivia walked upstairs wondering why she suddenly felt guilty. She couldn't explain it. By afternoon, she barely remembered how the disagreement had started. The same thing happened again a few days later. Then again the following week. Every disagreement somehow ended with Olivia apologizing, even when she wasn't sure what she had done wrong. At the hospital, one of her coworkers noticed the change. "You don't look like yourself." Olivia smiled politely. "I'm just tired." "You've been saying that for months." "I'll be okay." Her coworker studied her for a moment. "Take care of yourself too." Olivia nodded. "I will." She meant it. She simply didn't know how. At home, Gavin gradually took control of every financial decision. "I'll pay the mortgage," he told Olivia. "That'll help. I'll handle the insurance too." "Okay. The investments are doing well." "I'm glad." Whenever she asked about money, his answer was always ready. "Everything's under control." She trusted him. They were married. She never imagined she needed to verify anything. Meanwhile, Gavin's business faced growing pressure. Several commercial customers ended their maintenance contracts. Replacement parts became more expensive. Fuel costs continued rising. Some businesses delayed payments for weeks. Instead of telling Olivia, Gavin kept everything to himself. He believed he could solve the problem alone. He borrowed money. He applied for new loans. He used company funds to cover personal expenses. Each month became harder than the last. Still, he never admitted the truth. Protecting his reputation became more important than asking for help. One afternoon, his accountant placed several financial reports on his desk. "You need to reduce spending. I've got new contracts coming. They haven't been signed." "They will." "You've been saying that." Gavin folded the papers. "I'll work it out." His accountant looked disappointed. "I hope you're right." After he left, Gavin sat alone inside his office. Instead of calling creditors, he completed another loan application. At home, Frank noticed a different change. The basement door stayed locked. It had once been an ordinary workshop filled with tools and spare refrigeration parts. Now a heavy lock covered the handle. Shelving blocked part of the hallway leading to it. One Saturday morning, Frank walked downstairs looking for a screwdriver. The door wouldn't open. Before he could knock, Gavin appeared behind him. "What are you doing?" "I need the screwdriver set." "I moved everything." "Can I grab one?" "No." The answer came so quickly that Frank looked surprised. His father took a slow breath. "I'm sorry. I've got expensive equipment down there. I don't want anyone getting hurt." Frank nodded. "Okay." He walked back upstairs. The conversation stayed in his mind the rest of the day. That evening, Felicia noticed the same thing. "Why doesn't Dad let us downstairs anymore?" Frank shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe he's hiding birthday presents." He forced a smile. "Maybe." She laughed and skipped toward the living room. Frank didn't laugh. A few days later, Gavin arrived home driving a trailer. Something large was covered with a gray tarp. Frank watched through the front window. "Dad bought something." Felicia ran beside him. "What is it?" "I can't tell." Gavin backed the trailer toward the garage. After removing the cover, a large industrial freezer came into view. It was much bigger than any refrigerator Frank had ever seen. Olivia stepped outside. "That's huge." Gavin smiled. "I bought it from a restaurant that closed." "What do you need something that big for?" "It'll save money." "How?" "I can test commercial refrigeration systems at home instead of renting warehouse space." The explanation sounded reasonable. Olivia nodded. "That makes sense. It'll help the business." "I hope it does." Using special equipment, Gavin carefully moved the freezer into the basement. He refused every offer to help. "I've got it." Frank stepped forward. "I can push." "No." "I'll be careful." "I said I've got it." Frank immediately stepped back. His father's voice had become unusually sharp. A moment later, Gavin smiled again. "Sorry, I don't want anyone getting hurt." "It's really heavy." "It's okay," Frank answered. That night, Frank took the trash outside. As he walked past the side of the house, he noticed light coming through the small basement window. His father was still working. That wasn't unusual. Something else caught his attention. The large freezer now stood against the basement wall. Heavy electrical cables connected it to its own power source. Frank stared through the glass. Why would someone need a freezer that size inside their own basement? Before he could think any longer, Gavin looked toward the window. Their eyes met. For one brief moment, Gavin didn't smile. His expression became tense. Then he quickly raised his hand and waved. Frank slowly waved back. He walked inside without saying anything. That strange feeling stayed with him. He couldn't explain it. He only knew the basement no longer felt like part of the family home. It felt like a place where he was no longer welcome. Frank didn't know it yet. Years later, inside a courtroom, that same freezer would become the reason one simple question changed every life in his family. Several months passed after Gavin installed the industrial freezer. To everyone outside the Buckley home, life looked exactly the same. Buckley Cooling Services still answered service calls across Columbus. The church continued recommending Gavin. Restaurants still trusted him with emergency repairs. Parents greeted him at youth baseball games. Nothing about his public life suggested trouble. Behind closed doors, his business was running out of money. One Monday morning, Gavin unlocked his office before sunrise. He sat behind his desk and opened the company checking account. His smile disappeared. Another automatic payment had cleared overnight. The balance dropped lower than he expected. He opened another folder. 3 unpaid invoices remained overdue. He picked up the phone and called one customer. "Good morning. This is Gavin Buckley from Buckley Cooling Services. I'm calling about invoice 2847. The manager apologized. "I'm sorry, Gavin. We're still waiting on corporate approval." "When can you pay it?" "I honestly don't know." After ending the call, Gavin immediately called another customer. The answer was almost identical. Another payment delayed, another promise, another excuse. By noon, he had spoken with 6 customers. None of them sent money. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. Payroll was due in 4 days. Equipment suppliers wanted payment. Fuel prices continued climbing. Every month became harder than the last. Instead of asking Olivia for help, he convinced himself he could fix everything alone. He had spent years building his reputation. He refused to let anyone believe his business was failing. That afternoon, he drove to the bank. After meeting with a loan officer, he left carrying another loan agreement. The payment gave him temporary relief. It solved nothing. Within weeks, the money disappeared into old debts. At home, Olivia noticed Gavin becoming quieter. Most evenings, he carried work folders into the dining room. He studied numbers long after dinner. Whenever she asked how business was going, his answer never changed. "We're fine." She believed him. She had no reason not to. Her own schedule kept her busy. The hospital remained short-staffed. Many nurses worked overtime every week. Olivia accepted extra shifts whenever possible. The additional income helped support the family. One evening, after another overnight shift, she opened the kitchen cabinet where they kept household bills. Several envelopes were missing. She frowned. Later that morning, she asked Gavin, "Did you move the utility bills?" "I already paid them." "Oh, I've started keeping everything in my office." "Why?" "It keeps things organized." She smiled. "That actually makes sense." He nodded. "I'll handle the finances from now on." She thanked him. She believed he was trying to reduce her stress. Instead, Gavin had quietly made sure she could no longer see monthly statements. The changes continued. Bank notifications stopped arriving at the house. Credit card statements disappeared. Tax records moved into locked filing cabinets inside his office. Whenever Olivia asked about paperwork, Gavin answered immediately, "I've already taken care of it." She trusted every answer. One afternoon, Olivia stopped at the grocery store after work. Her debit card was declined. She looked at the cashier. "I'm sorry. Let me try again." The second attempt also failed. Embarrassed, she used another card. That evening, she mentioned it to Gavin. "My card was declined today." He looked up from his laptop. The bank probably flagged it. "They've never done that before." "I'll call them tomorrow." The next evening, he came home smiling. It was a security issue. "Everything's fixed." She accepted his explanation without another question. The truth was different. Gavin had transferred money into new accounts she could not access. He never told her. As weeks became months, Olivia noticed something else. She often remembered conversations differently than Gavin. "You told me the mortgage was paid." "It is." "I thought the insurance payment was due Friday." "No, I told you next month." "I could have sworn." "You've been working too many overnight shifts." Maybe he was right. She had been exhausted. Long hours affected anyone's memory. She stopped arguing. Every time she questioned something, Gavin had an answer ready. Slowly, she began doubting herself instead of doubting him. Frank noticed the changes too. Dinner conversations became shorter. His parents smiled less often. His father spent more time inside the locked basement. The sound of tools echoed upstairs late into the evening. Whenever Frank walked toward the basement door, Gavin stopped him. "Stay upstairs." "I'm just looking." "I said, stay upstairs." Frank obeyed. He never understood why the basement mattered so much. One Saturday afternoon, he found his father carrying several large boxes downstairs. "Dad, do you need help?" "No." "They look heavy." "I'll manage." The basement door closed. The lock clicked again. Frank stared at it for several seconds before walking away. That evening, Olivia found Gavin sitting alone in the dining room. Several papers lay spread across the table. As she entered, he gathered everything into a folder. "You don't have to hide your work from me," she said with a smile. "I'm just trying to finish some paperwork." "You've been doing a lot of paperwork lately. Running a business isn't easy." "I know." She kissed his cheek before going upstairs. She never realized those papers included overdue loans, unpaid taxes, and financial records that could destroy everything they had built together. Gavin believed he was protecting his family. In reality, every lie forced him deeper into a life that became harder to escape. And before long, money would no longer be the only secret he was hiding. As Buckley Cooling Services struggled, Gavin spent less time at home. He told Olivia he was meeting new commercial clients. Some days he left before sunrise. Other nights he returned long after the children were asleep. Olivia believed he was working harder to save the business. The truth was very different. During one service call at a local business, Gavin met Shannon Pierce. She had recently joined the company as an office administrator. They spoke only about refrigeration equipment during their first meeting. A few days later, she called to schedule another repair. Then another. Soon, Gavin found reasons to stop by, even when another technician could have handled the job. Their conversations became longer. They talked about work, life, family. One afternoon, Shannon asked, "Does your wife ever mind how much you work?" Gavin gave a tired smile. "It hasn't really been a marriage for a long time." Shannon looked surprised. "I didn't know. We've been living separate lives under the same roof. Why stay together?" "For the children." He lowered his head. "I've tried to make it work." She felt sorry for him. Everything Gavin told her sounded sincere. He never admitted that Olivia believed their marriage could still be saved. He never mentioned that they still shared family dinners. He never said Olivia continued working overnight shifts to support the household. Instead, he described himself as a husband trapped in a relationship that had already ended. Over the following months, Shannon became the person Gavin called whenever something went wrong. When a customer delayed payment, he called Shannon. When another bill arrived, he called Shannon. When he felt frustrated, he called Shannon. She listened patiently. She encouraged him. Slowly, friendship became something more. Meanwhile, Olivia noticed changes inside their home. One evening she balanced the family's checkbook. Several withdrawals didn't make sense. She looked through the register again. There were transfers she didn't remember discussing. When Gavin came home, she asked calmly, "I noticed several large withdrawals. I moved money between accounts." "Which accounts?" "Our business accounts." "I don't remember talking about that." "I told you 2 weeks ago." Olivia searched her memory. "I honestly don't remember." "You've been exhausted." He spoke so confidently that she questioned herself instead. "Maybe the first forgot." "You've been working too many overnight shifts." She nodded slowly. "Maybe that's it." The conversation ended. Gavin returned to his paperwork. Olivia remained uneasy. A week later, another surprise appeared. She logged into their online banking account. Several accounts no longer appeared. Thinking it was a computer error, she refreshed the page. Nothing changed. That evening she asked Gavin, "I can't see all of our accounts anymore. I reorganized everything. Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought I did." "You didn't." "I must have forgotten." His answer came quickly. "It makes bookkeeping easier." She wanted to believe him. Instead, she felt more confused than before. The next weekend, Frank noticed another change. His father rarely smiled anymore. Whenever he wasn't working, he disappeared into the basement. The industrial freezer seemed to run day and night. Its low humming sound reached the first floor whenever the house became quiet. Frank tried not to think about it. One Saturday afternoon, he carried a basketball into the backyard. As he passed the basement door, he heard something heavy slide across the concrete floor. He stopped walking. A moment later, the basement door opened. Gavin stepped outside. "What are you doing?" "I was going outside." "Then go outside." Frank looked toward the basement. "What are you building down there?" "I'm working." "Can I see?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it's dangerous." Frank nodded. "Okay." He walked into the backyard. From the kitchen window, Olivia watched the conversation. Later that evening she asked Gavin, "Why won't you let Frank into the basement anymore?" "I've got expensive equipment." "He was only curious. I don't want him getting hurt." She accepted the explanation. Still, she noticed how quickly he became defensive whenever the basement came up. Days turned into weeks. One afternoon, Olivia returned home earlier than expected. Gavin's truck wasn't in the driveway. She carried groceries inside. As she unpacked the bags, she noticed 2 coffee mugs in the sink. She frowned. She had washed every dish before leaving for work that morning. Thinking Gavin had met someone about business, she continued putting groceries away. A few minutes later, she found a second detail. A woman's scarf rested over the back of a dining room chair. It wasn't hers. She picked it up. She stared at it for several seconds. When Gavin came home that evening, she held it in her hand. "Whose scarf is this?" He looked at it briefly. "Oh, a customer left it here." "A customer came to the house?" "We discussed a refrigeration estimate." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't think it mattered." She looked at him carefully. "You've never invited customers into our home before." "It was raining." His answer sounded simple, reasonable. Olivia placed the scarf on the table. "If she calls, let her know she forgot it." "I will." The scarf disappeared the next morning. Olivia never saw it again. Several days later, Frank came upstairs carrying a small flashlight. "Mom? What is it?" "I found this near the basement stairs." Olivia looked at it. "It belongs to your dad." Frank hesitated. I heard him talking down there. Was someone helping him? I don't know. Did you see anybody? No. She smiled gently. He's probably talking on the phone. Frank wanted to believe her, but he remembered hearing 2 different voices before the basement door closed. He said nothing more. That night, as Olivia prepared for another overnight shift, she looked at Gavin across the kitchen. The man she had trusted for years seemed farther away than ever. She couldn't explain why. She only knew that money kept disappearing. The bank accounts kept changing. The basement remained locked. And someone else had already begun stepping into the life she believed still belonged to her. The questions in Olivia's mind refused to disappear. For weeks, she had accepted every explanation Gavin gave her. Now, the answers no longer fit what she was seeing. Money disappeared. Bank accounts changed. Bills no longer arrived at the house. The basement stayed locked. A woman's scarf had been left inside her home. Each event looked small by itself. Together, they formed a pattern she could no longer ignore. One afternoon, after finishing another overnight shift at Riverside Methodist Hospital, Olivia stopped by the bank before going home. She approached the customer service desk. "Good morning." The employee smiled. "How can I help you today?" "I'd like copies of our recent account statements." The employee typed for a few seconds. Then her expression changed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. William." "What is it?" "It appears your access has been changed." Olivia frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your name is no longer listed on several of the accounts." She stared at the screen. "There has to be a mistake. I'm only telling you what I see." "When did this happen?" "I'm afraid I can't discuss account changes without authorization." Olivia thanked her politely and walked back to her car. She sat behind the steering wheel without starting the engine. Her hands rested on the wheel. She wasn't angry. She was confused. She had never signed paperwork removing herself from any account. She drove home in silence, trying to understand what had happened. That evening, Gavin walked through the front door carrying his tool bag. Olivia met him in the kitchen. "I went to the bank today." Gavin looked at her. "Why?" "I wanted copies of our statements." "You should have asked me. They told me my name was removed from several accounts." Gavin placed his keys on the counter. "I consolidated everything." "Without telling me?" "I thought I already explained it." "You didn't. It's only temporary." "Why would you remove my name?" "It makes business accounting easier." Olivia looked directly at him. Those weren't business accounts. "They're connected." She waited for a better explanation. None came. Finally, Gavin picked up a glass of water. "You're worrying over nothing." Then he walked upstairs. Olivia remained in the kitchen. For the first time in their marriage, she no longer believed him. The following week, another surprise arrived. Olivia checked the family mailbox before leaving for work. Among the letters was a credit card statement addressed only to Gavin. She had never seen that account before. She opened it. Several restaurant charges appeared. Hotel payments. Gift purchases. None of them looked familiar. She quietly placed the statement inside her purse. That evening, she compared the dates with her work schedule. Nearly every charge happened while she was working overnight at the hospital. She felt her stomach tighten. The next morning, after dropping Frank and Felicia at school, Olivia drove past Gavin's office. His truck wasn't there. She called him. He answered immediately. "Hey, I drove by your office. I'm working at a customer's location." "Oh, I'll be home later." "Okay." She ended the call. Something didn't feel right. Instead of driving home, she turned around. She parked across the street from his office. Nearly an hour passed. His truck never appeared. She finally drove away. That afternoon, she stopped at Buckley Cooling Services. The receptionist looked surprised to see her. "Mrs. William, hi. I'm looking for Gavin. He hasn't been here today." Olivia forced a smile. "Oh, I thought he was meeting someone." "No. He called this morning and said he'd be out all day." She thanked the receptionist and walked outside. Now she knew. Gavin had lied. She simply didn't know where he had gone. That evening, she said nothing. She watched him laugh with Frank during dinner. She watched him help Felicia with her homework. Anyone looking through the window would have seen a happy family. Only Olivia knew that the trust holding everything together was beginning to disappear. Over the next several days, she quietly started paying attention. She photographed monthly bills before Gavin could move them. She copied account numbers into a notebook. She saved bank notifications. She wrote down dates whenever Gavin claimed to be working late. She wasn't trying to trap him. She wanted to understand the truth. A week later, one of her neighbors stopped her while she watered flowers in the front yard. "I saw someone visiting your house yesterday." Olivia looked up. "Yesterday?" "Yes." "I thought maybe you had family visiting." "What did she look like?" "A blonde woman." Olivia's heart sank. "Did you recognize her?" The neighbor shook her head. "No. She stayed about half an hour." Olivia thanked her. She said nothing else. That evening, she searched every room after Gavin left for work. Nothing looked out of place. When she reached the basement door, she stopped. The lock remained in place. She rested her hand against the handle. It didn't move. She listened. The industrial freezer hummed on the other side. Frank walked into the hallway. "Mom?" She turned. "What is it?" "I don't like it down there." "Why?" "I don't know." "Did something happen?" Frank slowly shook his head. "I just don't like it." Olivia wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "You don't have to go down there." He nodded. "I'm glad." She looked back at the locked door. For the first time, she shared her son's feeling. Something about that basement felt wrong. The following Friday, Olivia used her lunch break to meet with a family law attorney. She carried only a small folder. Inside were bank records, account information, and several financial documents she had quietly copied. The attorney listened carefully as Olivia explained everything. When she finished, the attorney asked one question. "Mrs. William, do you have access to all of your family's financial records?" Olivia answered honestly, "I used to." The attorney nodded. "Keep collecting every document you can find. Don't tell your husband you're doing this. If divorce becomes necessary, those records may become very important." Olivia never imagined she would hear those words. She thanked the attorney and returned to work. That evening, she looked at Gavin across the dinner table. He smiled. He laughed with Frank. He complimented Felicia's drawing. He looked exactly like the man everyone admired. Olivia wanted to believe that man was real. She didn't know Gavin had been preparing for this moment for years. While she had only begun gathering documents, he had already been building a case designed to take everything from her. Nearly 2 weeks passed after Olivia met with the family law attorney. She continued working her overnight nursing shifts. She continued caring for Frank and Felicia. She never confronted Gavin again. She wanted facts before making any decisions. Gavin acted as though everything inside the house was normal. He left early for work. He returned home smiling. He ate dinner with the children. He spoke kindly to the neighbors. Anyone watching the Buckley family would have believed nothing had changed. Olivia knew better. One Friday afternoon, she came home earlier than expected. Gavin's truck was parked in the driveway. She walked inside, carrying her work bag. The house was unusually quiet. She heard voices coming from the dining room. One voice belonged to Gavin. The other belonged to a woman. Olivia walked toward the room. The conversation stopped the moment she entered. Shannon Pierce stood beside the dining table. She looked surprised. Gavin immediately stood. "Olivia, you're home early." Olivia looked at Shannon. Neither woman spoke for several seconds. Finally, Gavin broke the silence. "This is Shannon." Olivia nodded politely. "We've already met." Both Gavin and Shannon looked confused. Olivia placed her bag on the floor. "I found her scarf here several weeks ago." Shannon slowly looked at Gavin. "You told me your wife had already moved out." Olivia's eyes immediately shifted toward him. "What?" Shannon frowned. "You said the marriage was over." Olivia stared at Gavin. "You told another woman I left this house?" Gavin quickly stepped forward. "Let me explain." Olivia raised her hand. "Don't." She looked directly at Shannon. "Have you been told we're separated?" Shannon answered honestly, "Yes." "We still live together." Shannon looked back at Gavin. "You said you were only staying together until the paperwork was finished." Olivia felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her. The lies were no longer hidden. They were standing inside her own home. Without another word, Shannon picked up her purse. She looked at Olivia. "I'm sorry." Then she walked out the front door. The house became quiet. Olivia faced Gavin. "How long?" "It isn't what you think." "How long?" He looked away. "It just happened." "I asked how long." He never answered. Olivia slowly climbed the stairs. She packed a small overnight bag. She took only a few clothes. Nothing else. Frank noticed her suitcase. "Mom?" She forced a smile. "I'm staying with a friend tonight." "Are you coming back?" She knelt beside him. "I will always come back for you." Felicia hugged her tightly. "You promise?" "I promise." Olivia kissed both children before leaving. She cried for most of the drive. The following Monday morning, someone knocked on the front door of the temporary apartment where she was staying. A process server handed her an envelope. "Mrs. Olivia William?" "Yes." "You've been served." She looked down at the documents. Petition for divorce. She expected that much. Then she turned another page. Her hands began shaking. Gavin Buckley was requesting sole legal custody, sole physical custody, primary decision-making authority. She read the pages again. And again, she could hardly believe them. She immediately called her attorney. "I need to see you today." That afternoon, the attorney carefully reviewed every page. He isn't only asking for a divorce. I know. He's asking the court to award him everything. Olivia looked exhausted. "I don't understand." The attorney continued reading. "He claims you're rarely home. I work nights. He also says he's been the children's primary caregiver. I worked those shifts for our family. I understand. But the court will focus on evidence." Olivia lowered her head. "I never kept records." The attorney looked at her. "Did you save your work schedules?" "No." "School calendars?" "No." "Medical appointments?" Gavin handled most of those. The attorney closed the file. "He's been preparing for this much longer than you have." Over the following weeks, Olivia finally saw what Gavin had been doing. He produced detailed calendars showing school pickups, volunteer records from church, youth baseball schedules, photographs from school events, medical appointment logs, holiday activities. Everything presented the same picture. A father deeply involved in every part of his children's lives. None of it was false, but it wasn't the whole truth. While Gavin attended games and meetings, Olivia worked overnight so the family could afford the life they enjoyed. Her sacrifices happened while everyone else slept. There were no photographs of those nights. No audience watched her comfort frightened patients before driving home to prepare breakfast for her own children. No certificates recognized missed holidays or endless overtime. The courtroom would never see those moments. As the custody hearing approached, Olivia realized she wasn't simply fighting for her children. She was fighting against a story Gavin had been quietly building for years. The custody hearing began several weeks later. Every seat inside the courtroom was filled. Olivia sat beside her attorney. Across the room, Gavin sat beside his own attorney. Shannon sat quietly behind him. Frank and Felicia remained outside the courtroom with a court-appointed child specialist until they were needed. Judge Harland Crowe entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. Gavin's attorney called the first witness. One by one, people described the man they believed they knew. Each testimony strengthened Gavin's case. A church leader spoke first. "Gavin has volunteered with our children's programs for years. He's dependable. If we need help, he's always there. He's the kind of father children need." Olivia listened without interrupting. Everything the witness said was true. Gavin had volunteered. He had helped the church. But the witness had never seen Olivia leaving for another overnight shift so the family could pay its bills. The next witness described Gavin's work with youth baseball. He coached children with patience. He encouraged every player. He never raised his voice. He always stayed after practice if a child needed extra help. Again, the testimony was truthful. Olivia remembered many afternoons when Gavin coached baseball while she worked another 12-hour shift at Riverside Methodist Hospital. The judge wrote careful notes. Another witness took the stand. This time, it was someone connected to Frank and Felicia's school. The witness explained that Gavin regularly attended school meetings. He met with teachers. He volunteered during school activities. He arrived whenever the school called. The attorney asked one final question. In your opinion, is Gavin Buckley an involved father? Absolutely. The answer came without hesitation. Olivia lowered her eyes. She wasn't angry with the witness. The witness simply described what had been seen. No one asked why Olivia missed many daytime events. No one explained she was usually caring for hospital patients while those meetings took place. The hearing continued. Another witness described Gavin as a respected business owner. Another praised his reputation in the neighborhood. Another spoke about his willingness to help families without charging for emergency repairs. Every statement painted the same picture: responsible, reliable, trustworthy. Judge Crow listened carefully to every word. When it became Olivia's turn, her attorney asked simple questions. Mrs. William, why did you work overnight shifts? To support my family. Who benefited from those extra hours? My husband and my children. Did you want to miss school events? Never. Why did you miss them? Because I was earning the extra income our family depended on. Her attorney nodded. Did you love your children? More than anything. Why didn't you keep records of your sacrifices? Olivia answered honestly. I never believed I would need to prove I loved my own children. Several people inside the courtroom looked toward her. Her words were sincere, but sincerity alone could not replace documents. Gavin's attorney stood for cross-examination. Mrs. William, how many overnight shifts did you work each month? A lot. So you weren't home many nights? I was working. Please answer the question. I wasn't home because I was working. You agree you missed many evenings with your children. I missed them so I could provide for them. You also missed school mornings. I often arrived home after they left. You missed baseball games. Some of them. You missed church activities. When I was scheduled to work. Every answer, though truthful, sounded exactly the way Gavin's attorney wanted. The courtroom heard only one thing. Olivia was absent. No one explained why those absences existed. After Olivia stepped down, Shannon Pierce was called. She walked to the witness stand looking nervous. Judge Crow reminded her to tell the truth. She promised she would. Gavin's attorney asked the first question. Ms. Pierce, how do you know Gavin Buckley? We became friends through his work. Did he ever discuss his marriage with you? Yes. What did he tell you? He said the marriage had already fallen apart. He said they were living separate lives. He said they stayed in the same house only because of the children. Did you believe him? Yes. Why? Because that's how he lived. The attorney continued. Did Gavin ever speak badly about his children? Never. How did he speak about them? He loved them. He talked about Frank and Felicia every day. He wanted to protect them. Olivia listened quietly. She realized Shannon wasn't trying to hurt her. Shannon believed every lie Gavin had told. When Olivia's attorney questioned her, the truth slowly became clearer. Ms. Pierce, when did you learn Gavin and Olivia were still living together as husband and wife? The day Olivia came home and found me there. Were you surprised? Yes. Very surprised. What had Gavin told you before that day? That the marriage was already over. So, you believed he was free to begin another relationship? Yes. Did you later discover that wasn't true? Shannon lowered her head. Yes. The courtroom became quiet. Her answer damaged Gavin's credibility, but it did not erase the mountain of evidence supporting his role as a father. As the hearing continued, Judge Crow reviewed calendars, attendance records, volunteer logs, school documents, and financial records. Every document had been carefully organized. Every file supported Gavin's version of events. Olivia had honesty. Gavin had years of paperwork. By the end of the hearing, Olivia's attorney understood the difficult position they faced. The truth of Olivia's sacrifices was real, but most of those sacrifices had never been documented. Meanwhile, Gavin had spent years building the image the court now saw. Long before Judge Crow announced his decision, the evidence already leaned heavily in Gavin's favor. The custody hearing reached its final day. Judge Harlan Crow reviewed every document one last time. The courtroom remained quiet as both attorneys delivered their closing arguments. Gavin's attorney stood first. "Your Honor, this case is about stability. My client has consistently shown that he is available for his children. He attends school meetings. He volunteers at church. He coaches youth sports. He manages their medical appointments. The evidence clearly shows that Gavin Buckley has been the children's primary caregiver." He returned to his seat. Olivia's attorney stood next. "Your Honor, this case is also about sacrifice. Olivia William worked overnight shifts so her family could survive financially. She missed many daytime events because she was supporting the very household now being used against her. Her work should never be mistaken for neglect." He looked toward the judge. "She loves her children. She has always loved her children. That has never changed." Judge Crow thanked both attorneys. He gathered his notes. The courtroom became still. After several moments, he began reading his decision. This has been a difficult case. Both parents clearly love Frank and Felicia. The court has carefully reviewed all testimony and every document submitted. He turned another page. The court must base its decision on the evidence presented. He looked toward Gavin. The evidence demonstrates consistent involvement in the children's daily lives, school activities, medical care, and community participation. Then he looked at Olivia. The court also recognizes Mrs. Williams' years of hard work and financial support. However, the available evidence does not outweigh the documentation presented by Mr. Buckley. Olivia lowered her eyes. She already knew what was coming. Judge Crow spoke the final words. "Primary physical custody of Frank Buckley and Felicia Buckley is awarded to their father, Gavin Buckley." The decision echoed through the courtroom. Gavin slowly closed his eyes. Months of preparation had worked. His attorney shook his hand. "You did it." Shannon smiled with relief from the gallery. She believed the hardest part of Gavin's life had finally ended. Olivia remained seated. She felt as though every overnight shift, every missed birthday breakfast, every holiday spent inside the hospital, had disappeared with one decision. She never blamed Frank. She never blamed Felicia. She never blamed Judge Crow. He ruled according to what had been placed before him. A deputy gathered the court files. Another prepared the custody paperwork. People quietly stood to leave. The hearing appeared finished. Then a chair moved across the floor. Frank stood. Every person nearby turned toward him. Judge Crow noticed immediately. "Yes, Frank?" The 12-year-old looked directly at the judge. His voice remained calm. "Mr. Judge." Judge Crow waited. "If Dad takes us home." Frank looked toward Gavin for only a second. "Will my little sister in the freezer finally live?" Every person inside the courtroom stopped moving. The deputy carrying court files froze. One attorney slowly lowered a folder onto the table. Shannon looked at Gavin in confusion. Felicia stared at her brother. "What little sister?" Frank never answered her. Judge Crow leaned forward. "Frank, can you repeat what you just said?" Frank nodded. "I asked if my little sister in the freezer will finally live." Olivia felt her heart pound. She looked from Frank to Gavin, then back to Frank. "Frank, what are you talking about?" Frank answered honestly. "Dad told me not to tell anybody." Judge Crow immediately raised his hand. "No one leaves this courtroom." The deputies closed the doors. Everyone returned to their seats. Judge Crow looked gently at Frank. "Come here, son." Frank walked to the front of the courtroom. The judge spoke calmly. "I need you to tell me exactly what you mean." Frank nodded. "When I was little, Dad showed me the big freezer in our basement. He said my baby sister was sleeping inside. He said she'd wake up one day." Judge Crow listened carefully. "What else did he tell you?" "He told me never to open it." "Did he say why?" "He said people wouldn't understand." "Did he tell you not to tell your mother?" Frank nodded. "He said if I told anybody." Our family would be destroyed. Judge Crow turned toward Gavin. Senor Buckley. Before he could continue, Gavin stood. Your Honor, my son is confused. He's been under a great deal of stress. Judge Crow didn't interrupt. Gavin continued speaking. This is an old misunderstanding. Judge Crow asked one question. What misunderstanding? Gavin hesitated. I don't remember exactly what I told him. Frank immediately looked at the judge. I remember. Everyone turned back toward the boy. Dad said she was sleeping. He told me she'd wake up. He told me never to touch the freezer. Judge Crow studied Gavin's face. The confidence Gavin had shown throughout the custody hearing was gone. His hands shook slightly. Sweat formed across his forehead. His breathing became uneven. Olivia noticed it immediately. She had never seen him look afraid like this. Not once during their marriage. Judge Crow made another decision without hesitation. He looked toward the clerk. Contact child interview specialists immediately. Then he turned to the deputies. Notify law enforcement assigned to this courthouse. The deputies moved at once. Judge Crow looked back at Frank. You did the right thing. Frank simply nodded. Olivia sat frozen. A memory suddenly came rushing back. Years earlier, she had collapsed during an exhausting overnight shift. When she woke in a hospital bed, Gavin had been sitting beside her. He told her she had lost their unborn baby. She believed him. She mourned that child. She never questioned his story. Now Frank was talking about a little sister inside a freezer. Olivia slowly turned toward Gavin. For the first time, she wondered whether the worst day of her life had been another lie. Outside the courtroom, deputies quietly began making urgent phone calls. Inside, no one realized that the custody case had just become the beginning of a much larger criminal investigation. Judge Harlan Crow watched as a child interview specialist escorted Frank into a private interview room inside the courthouse. The room was simple. A small table, 4 chairs, a box of colored pencils, blank paper, nothing that looked frightening. Frank sat down without resisting. He held the sleeves of his shirt tightly in both hands. The specialist sat across from him. I'm here to listen. Frank nodded. You aren't in trouble. I know. I only want you to tell me the truth. I am. The specialist smiled gently. I believe you. Frank relaxed a little. Can you tell me about your little sister? Frank answered immediately. Dad said she was sleeping. Where? In the big freezer. Did you ever see her? No. Did your father ever open the freezer while you were there? No. What did he tell you? He said not to touch it. Did he explain why? He said she had to stay cold until she woke up. The specialist wrote down every word. How old were you when he first told you that? I don't remember. Were you little? Yes. What did you think? I believed him. Why? Because he was my dad. The specialist nodded. Did you ever tell your mother? Frank quickly shook his head. No. Why not? Dad said our family would be destroyed. Did you believe him? Yes. When did you begin wondering if something wasn't right? Frank looked down at the table. When I got older. What made you wonder? Nobody ever talked about my little sister. Mom never said anything. Felicia didn't know. I thought maybe everybody forgot. The specialist continued writing. Why did you tell the judge today? Frank looked toward the door. Because he said I had to live with Dad. If I went home, I thought maybe she'd never wake up. At the same time, Olivia sat in another room with a victim advocate. She could not stop thinking about the day Gavin told her she had lost their baby. The memory returned more clearly than ever. She remembered collapsing during an exhausting overnight shift at Riverside Methodist Hospital. She remembered waking in a hospital bed. She remembered feeling weak from medication. She remembered Gavin sitting beside her, crying. He held her hand. He told her the doctors had done everything they could. He said their unborn daughter could not be saved. Olivia had been too weak to ask questions. She trusted him completely. He handled every arrangement afterward. He told her there was nothing she needed to worry about. She believed every word. Now every detail felt different. She searched her memory again. She could not remember speaking directly with the doctor about losing the baby. She could not remember signing any paperwork. She could not remember anyone explaining what had happened. Only Gavin had explained it. Her breathing became heavier. What if... She stopped herself. She wasn't ready to finish that sentence. Outside the interview rooms, Gavin remained with his attorney. He looked toward the courthouse doors every few seconds. His attorney spoke quietly. "You need to stay calm. My son misunderstood." "Then keep saying that. He was just a child." His attorney nodded. "Don't add anything else." A detective approached them. "Mr. Buckley." Gavin stood. "Yes? We need to ask you several questions. My attorney will be present." "That's your right." Inside another office, detectives compared Frank's interview with the statements he made in court. Every answer matched. He never changed his story. He never added dramatic details. He simply repeated what he had believed since childhood. One detective looked at the written notes. "He's consistent." Another nodded. "He isn't guessing. He believes every word." Judge Crow reviewed the initial interview summary. He understood that a child's statement alone did not prove a crime, but it did establish something equally important. There was enough information to investigate immediately. He authorized the detectives to seek an emergency search warrant for the Buckley residence. Within minutes, the paperwork was prepared. The affidavit included Frank's courtroom statement, his recorded interview, the description of the locked basement, the industrial freezer. Olivia's statement about the pregnancy she had been told ended in miscarriage. A judge reviewed the request without delay. The warrant was signed. Detectives left the courthouse immediately. Several police vehicles headed toward the Buckley home. Inside the courthouse, no one knew what officers would find once they entered the basement. Gavin watched the detectives leave through the courthouse windows. For the first time that day, he understood he was no longer fighting a custody case. He was about to face an investigation that reached far beyond his carefully built public image. Police vehicles arrived at the Buckley home within minutes. Detectives secured the property. No one entered. No one left. One officer read the search warrant aloud. Another recorded every step with a body camera. Everything inside the house had to be documented exactly as it appeared. The living room looked ordinary. Family photographs covered the shelves. Frank and Felicia smiled from school pictures. Church certificates hung on one wall. Nothing inside the home suggested what had brought detectives there. The officers moved carefully through each room. They photographed the kitchen, the bedrooms, the home office, the hallway leading to the basement. Then they stopped at the locked basement door. One detective examined the heavy lock. "This matches the child's description." Another photographed it before touching anything. An officer unlocked the door using keys recovered from Gavin during the search. The basement lights came on. Workbenches lined one wall. Shelves held refrigeration tools and spare parts. Everything appeared neat and organized. The officers continued documenting the room. Near the back wall stood the industrial freezer Frank had described. It was larger than a household freezer. It had its own electrical connection. The power unit continued running. One detective checked the photographs taken during the custody hearing. The freezer matched Frank's description exactly. No one touched it immediately. Every angle was photographed first. Measurements were recorded. The electrical wiring was documented. The floor around the freezer was examined. Detectives noticed the concrete beneath it looked newer than the surrounding floor. That detail was photographed as well. One detective looked at the others. "We've documented everything." Another nodded. "Proceed." The freezer was disconnected from its power supply. An evidence technician carefully examined the exterior before opening it. The lid was lifted. The officers remained professional. No one rushed to conclusions. The contents were photographed exactly as found. Inside, investigators located human remains consistent with those of an infant. The discovery immediately changed the investigation. The freezer was sealed as evidence. Additional forensic specialists were requested. The basement became an active crime scene. Every item nearby was marked and cataloged. Nothing would be removed until the entire area had been documented. At the courthouse, detectives received the first update. One officer entered the interview room where Judge Harlan Crow had been reviewing reports. "We've confirmed the child's statement led us to significant evidence." Judge Crow slowly nodded. "What have you found?" "The investigation is continuing, Your Honor. We're treating the residence as a major crime scene." Judge Crow understood the importance of protecting the investigation. He asked no further questions. In another room, Olivia waited anxiously. A detective sat across from her. "We need to ask you about your pregnancy." Olivia answered every question. "I became pregnant several years ago. Everything seemed normal. I continued working. One night, I became very sick during an overnight shift. I collapsed. When I woke up, Gavin told me our baby had died." The detective asked, "Do you remember speaking directly with the doctor about the pregnancy?" Olivia closed her eyes, searching her memory. "No." "Do you remember signing hospital paperwork?" "No." "Did you ever receive medical records?" "No." "Who handled everything afterward?" Olivia's voice became softer. "Gavin." The detective wrote down her answer. "Did you ever see a death certificate?" "No." "A burial record?" "No." "I trusted my husband." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. "I believed everything he told me." The detective placed another document on the table. "We'll be requesting your medical records from the hospital." Olivia nodded. "I want the truth." Across the courthouse, Gavin remained with his attorney. He noticed detectives moving quickly through the hallway. Their expressions had changed. He understood something had happened at the house. He leaned toward his attorney. "They searched the basement." His attorney looked directly at him. "If there's anything you haven't told me, now is the time." Gavin said nothing. Minutes later, detectives returned from the residence. One of them approached the interview team and quietly delivered the initial findings. The investigation immediately expanded. Additional search warrants were prepared for business records, financial documents, computers, and storage locations connected to Gavin. What had started as a custody hearing was now a criminal investigation involving multiple lines of inquiry. Olivia watched officers moving through the courthouse. She knew they had found something. She didn't yet know every detail. She only knew one painful fact. The story Gavin had told her about losing their unborn child could no longer be accepted without question. Everything she believed about that day was now under investigation. The discovery inside the basement changed the investigation overnight. Detectives no longer focused only on the Buckley house. Search warrants were served at Buckley Cooling Services. Officers collected business computers, financial records, tax files, loan agreements, hard drives, boxes of company documents. Everything was taken for examination. The business office looked as organized as Gavin had always presented himself. Every folder had a label. Every cabinet was locked. Every document appeared carefully arranged. But the numbers told a different story. Financial investigators compared bank statements with tax filings. They discovered company accounts that had never been reported during the divorce proceedings. Several business loans had been hidden. Large debts had been moved between personal and company accounts. Money had been transferred through accounts Olivia no longer had permission to access. Detectives continued comparing signatures. Some financial documents contained signatures that did not match Olivia's verified handwriting. Those records were immediately separated for forensic examination. The investigation expanded again. Investigators reviewed mortgage records, insurance paperwork, credit applications, business contracts. Several documents contained false information about the company's finances. Others listed income that did not exist. The image Gavin presented to banks and to the family court did not match the records investigators were now collecting. Meanwhile, detectives requested Gavin's electronic communications, phone records, emails, text messages. The timeline quickly became clear. His relationship with Shannon had begun long before he admitted it. Several messages showed Gavin repeatedly describing himself as a man abandoned by his wife. He claimed Olivia no longer loved him. He claimed they were living completely separate lives. He claimed divorce was only waiting for a judge's signature. Every one of those statements was false. Shannon received a phone call asking her to return to the police station. She arrived carrying a small folder. A detective greeted her. "Thank you for coming. I want to help." The detective invited her into an interview room. "I understand you recently learned Gavin lied to you." Shannon nodded. "I believed everything he said." She opened the folder she had brought. "I printed our text messages." She placed them on the table. "I also brought emails." The detective thanked her. Shannon continued speaking. "He always told me Olivia had already moved on. He said they stayed in the same house only because of the children. He told me he wanted a peaceful divorce." She looked down at the papers. "I never would have started a relationship with him if I had known the truth." The detective asked another question. "Did Gavin ever discuss his finances with you?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "He told me his business was successful. He said the divorce would be simple because everything was already organized." The detective compared her statement with the financial records already collected. Nothing matched Gavin's claims. Shannon removed another envelope from her purse. "I found these yesterday." Inside were copies of handwritten notes Gavin had left at her apartment. Several notes discussed moving money before the divorce became final. Others mentioned changing account information. One note reminded himself to move important documents before Olivia found them. The detective carefully placed every page into evidence bags. "You've helped us understand the timeline." Shannon nodded. "I wish I had known sooner." At the courthouse, Olivia met with detectives again. One investigator explained what they could legally share. "We've uncovered significant financial evidence." Olivia listened quietly. "Did he hide everything from me?" "It appears he controlled nearly every financial decision for several years." She closed her eyes. "So, I wasn't losing my memory." "No. He repeatedly gave you false explanations." Tears filled her eyes. "I kept thinking I was forgetting things." The detective answered gently. "The records don't support that." Olivia looked toward the window. For years, she had blamed herself. Now she understood why every conversation had left her confused. The confusion had not come from exhaustion. It came from repeated deception. Later that evening, detectives gathered all of the evidence collected during the first day of the investigation. The timeline had become much clearer. The hidden debts, the forged financial documents, the secret bank accounts, the false statements during the divorce, the affair built on lies, the fabricated story surrounding Olivia's pregnancy. None of those discoveries stood alone. Each one supported the others. The respected businessman presented during the custody hearing no longer matched the evidence filling the investigation files. By the end of the day, the case against Gavin had become much larger than anyone inside Judge Harlan Crow's courtroom could have imagined only hours earlier. The man who believed he had won everything through careful planning had watched that entire plan collapse in a single afternoon because one 12-year-old boy chose to tell the truth. The criminal investigation moved quickly. Within days, the family court suspended the custody order that had awarded Frank and Felicia to Gavin Buckley. Judge Harlan Crow reviewed the emergency filings. After examining the new evidence, he issued another order. Temporary custody, immediately returned to Olivia William. When Olivia received the news, she broke into tears. Not because the legal battle was over, it was only beginning. She cried because her children were finally coming home. That afternoon, Frank and Felicia walked through the front door together. Olivia hugged them without letting go. "I've missed you." "We missed you too," Frank answered. Felicia wrapped both arms around her mother. "Are we staying here now?" "Yes." "For good?" Olivia smiled through her tears. "We're together. That's what matters." The children slowly settled back into the house. Their bedrooms remained the same. Their favorite books were still on the shelves. Their family photographs still covered the walls. For the first time in many months, the house felt safe again. Meanwhile, Gavin remained in custody. The investigation had grown far beyond the original custody dispute. Prosecutors reviewed the evidence collected from the Buckley home, the business, and the financial records. The case moved to criminal court. During the trial, prosecutors presented the evidence step by step. They began with Frank's courtroom statement. Then they introduced the recorded child interview. Jurors watched as Frank calmly repeated the same story he had told Judge Harlan Crow. He never changed a single detail. Next came the forensic evidence recovered from the basement. Experts explained how the infant's remains had been concealed inside the industrial freezer for years. Medical records obtained from Riverside Methodist Hospital were also presented. Those records directly contradicted the story Gavin had told Olivia. The evidence showed Olivia had never received the explanation she believed. She had relied entirely on Gavin's account while recovering from her medical emergency. The prosecution then moved to the financial evidence. Investigators displayed bank records showing hidden accounts. Loan documents revealed debts Gavin concealed during the divorce. Financial experts explained how money had been transferred between accounts without Olivia's knowledge. Additional records showed forged signatures on multiple financial documents. Handwriting experts compared those signatures with verified samples. The differences were clear. The jury carefully examined every document. Next, detectives explained how Gavin removed Olivia's access to family accounts, while convincing her she was simply forgetting conversations because of exhaustion. Jurors listened closely. The pattern became obvious. The deception had not happened once. It had continued for years. Shannon also testified. She spoke honestly. I believed Gavin. He told me his marriage had already ended. He told me Olivia had moved on. I later discovered none of that was true. She admitted her mistake without trying to protect herself. She explained that once she learned the truth, she immediately cooperated with detectives and turned over every message and document she had. Her testimony matched the electronic evidence collected during the investigation. When the prosecution finished presenting its case, the evidence formed one clear picture: the hidden financial records, the forged documents, the false statements, the deception surrounding Olivia's pregnancy, the concealment of the infant's remains. Each piece supported the next. The jury did not need to rely on assumptions. They relied on evidence. After deliberating, the jurors returned to the courtroom. The foreperson stood. One verdict after another was read. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Gavin Buckley was convicted on charges related to concealing the infant's remains, fraud, forgery, and obstruction. Olivia closed her eyes. She felt no celebration, only relief. The years of confusion had finally ended. Frank reached for his mother's hand. She squeezed it gently. Felicia leaned against Olivia's shoulder. Judge Harlan Crow looked across the courtroom before closing the case. The evidence has spoken. This court hopes these children can now begin rebuilding their lives. As everyone slowly left the courtroom, Olivia looked at Frank. If you hadn't spoken that day. Frank quietly answered, I just told the truth. Those simple words had changed the lives of everyone in the Buckley family. The weeks after the trial felt very different inside Olivia's home. The fear that had followed the family for years slowly disappeared. For the first time in a long while, Frank and Felicia slept through the night. Even so, the memories did not disappear overnight. Some mornings, Frank woke from dreams that brought him back to the basement door. He never spoke much about them. Olivia noticed the dark circles under his eyes. One morning, she sat beside him at the breakfast table. Did you sleep well? Frank looked down at his cereal. Not really. The dreams again? He nodded. I keep thinking about everything Dad told me. Olivia reached across the table and held his hand. You believed him because you trusted him. I should have said something sooner. You were a little boy. I thought I did something wrong. You didn't. You told the truth when it mattered most. Frank finally looked at his mother. Do you really believe that? I know it. Those words lifted a burden Frank had carried for years. A few days later, Olivia took both children to their first counseling appointment. At first, neither child wanted to talk. Frank answered only a few questions. Felicia stayed close to her mother. Olivia never pressured either of them. She simply encouraged them to keep coming. Week after week, things slowly changed. Frank began speaking more openly. He talked about the locked basement. He talked about being afraid to ask questions. He talked about believing every word his father told him, because children naturally trust their parents. Each conversation made the weight on his heart a little lighter. Felicia also found her voice. She admitted she had never understood why everyone suddenly became so sad. She remembered hearing arguments she could not explain. She remembered seeing her mother cry after everyone else had gone to bed. She remembered missing the happy family they once believed they had. Olivia listened carefully. Whenever either child spoke, she never interrupted. She wanted them to know their feelings mattered. Life slowly settled into a new routine. They ate dinner together every evening. Frank returned to school. Felicia went back to dance classes. Olivia adjusted her work schedule so she could spend more afternoons at home. The house gradually became filled with ordinary moments again. Homework at the kitchen table, movies on Friday evenings, pancakes on Saturday mornings, long walks through the neighborhood on Sunday afternoons. None of those moments erased the past. They reminded the family that life could still move forward. One afternoon, Olivia received an unexpected phone call. It was Shannon Pierce. Her voice sounded nervous. "I know you don't owe me anything." Olivia listened quietly. "I'd like to apologize." After a brief pause, Olivia agreed to meet her. The following afternoon, they met at a small cafe. Shannon looked exhausted. "I've wanted to say this for a long time." Olivia waited. "I'm sorry. I believed everything Gavin told me. He convinced me your marriage was already over. I never wanted to hurt you or your children." Olivia studied her face. She saw regret, not excuses. Shannon continued. "The day you came home and found me there, I realized he had lied to both of us." Tears filled her eyes. "I should have asked more questions." Olivia answered honestly. "He lied to me for years. He was very good at making people believe him." Shannon nodded. "I know that now. I've thought about Frank every day since the trial. He was so brave." Olivia smiled softly. "He saved our family." "I believe that." Shannon stood. "I don't expect forgiveness. I only wanted you to know how sorry I am." Olivia also stood. "You told the truth when detectives needed your help. That mattered." Shannon thanked her quietly before leaving. It was the last time they saw each other. Back at home, Frank noticed something changing inside himself. The fear that once followed him everywhere became smaller. One evening, he looked at his mother. "I don't think about the basement every day anymore." Olivia smiled. "That's a good sign. I think about school now. And baseball. And what I want to do when I grow up." She squeezed his shoulder. "You deserve that." Felicia laughed from the living room as she practiced another dance routine. Frank watched his sister. For the first time in years, her laughter sounded carefree. Olivia looked around her home. The pain had not disappeared. It probably never would, but hope had returned. And every new day gave her children another chance to grow without fear. Years passed. The Buckley family no longer measured life by court dates or investigations. They measured it by peaceful mornings, family dinners, birthdays, graduations, and ordinary moments they once feared they might never enjoy again. Frank grew into a thoughtful young man. The experience that changed his childhood also shaped his future. He never forgot how frightened he felt carrying a secret he did not understand. He never forgot how one adult finally listened. After graduating from college, Frank became a social worker. He chose to work with children. Every day, he met young people who were afraid to speak. Some blamed themselves for things they could not control. Others believed secrets they had been told to keep. Frank always gave them the same attention Judge Harlan Crow had given him. He listened first. He never rushed them. He never assumed a child was confused simply because a story sounded unusual. His co-workers admired the patience he showed every family. Many children trusted him because they felt he truly understood their fears. Felicia also found her own purpose. Her childhood taught her how deeply fear could affect a young mind. After years of study, she became a child psychologist. She worked with children recovering from trauma and family conflict. Parents often thanked her for helping their sons and daughters smile again. Felicia always reminded them that healing takes time. She knew that lesson from her own life. Olivia continued working in healthcare for several more years before reducing her hospital schedule. She began speaking at community programs, family support groups, and professional conferences. She shared her experience with emotional manipulation and financial control. She encouraged people to ask questions when something did not feel right. She reminded parents that love should never require fear or silence. Her message reached many families across Ohio. People thanked her for giving them the courage to seek help before their own situations became worse. One afternoon, Frank visited his mother. They sat together on the back porch. The afternoon sun warmed the yard where the children had once played. Frank smiled. "I've been thinking about someone." Olivia looked at him. "Who?" "Judge Crow. The day I spoke in court. He believed me." Olivia nodded. "He did, if he had ignored me." Frank stopped for a moment. "I don't know where we'd be today." Olivia reached over and squeezed his hand. "Neither do I." A few days later, Frank sat at his desk after work. He picked up a pen and began writing a letter. When he finished, he mailed it to Judge Harlan Crow. Several days later, the judge received the envelope. He opened it before the start of another court session. The letter read, "Dear Judge Crow, you probably don't remember every child who has stood in your courtroom. I remember you. Years ago, I was the little boy who asked about my sister in the freezer. Most people thought my words were too strange to matter. You didn't. You listened. Because you listened, the truth came out. My mother got her life back. My sister and I grew up together in a safe home. Today I work with children who are afraid to speak. I try to listen the way you listened to me. Thank you for giving one frightened boy the chance to be heard. I will never forget it." Frank Buckley. Judge Crow finished reading the letter. He carefully folded it and placed it inside his desk drawer. For a long moment, he looked through the courtroom where another family was waiting for justice. He quietly reminded himself that every child deserved to be heard. Some stories sounded impossible. That did not make them untrue. Outside the courthouse, life continued. Frank continued helping children. Felicia continued helping families heal. Olivia continued encouraging people to recognize emotional abuse, financial control, and deception before those problems destroyed another home. Their lives proved that painful experiences do not have to define the future. They can become the reason someone else finds hope. The Buckley family's story spread throughout their community. People no longer remembered Gavin for the image he carefully created. They remembered the lesson his case left behind. A polished reputation should never replace careful listening. Children should never be ignored because their words sound unusual. Truth does not become less important because it is difficult to believe. Sometimes, the smallest voice in a room carries the most important message. Thank you for spending your time with Will and Rise Stories. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who believes every child deserves to be heard. Until next time, remember this: real character is revealed by truth, not appearances. Sometimes one honest sentence is enough to change an entire family's future.